Hi, welcome to the Gently Being podcast. I'm your host, Kim. In this first episode, I want to provide you with an idea of what this podcast will offer you, dear listener. And in the second half, I'm just going to be sharing some quick thoughts on this October season and the novel Piranesi. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, I was facilitating in-person mindfulness courses, meditation sessions, and special events. I was focused on providing welcoming, mindful spaces for in-person gatherings in my communities. I was deeply inspired by the people who came out to the classes, meditation sessions, and events, and I learned a lot from everything that everyone would share. But I had to stop my work when the pandemic began. After a long initial phase of fear and confusion, I began to meditate on what could Gently Being do and what could Gently Being be at this time. During my in-person classes, I tried to provide participants with a variety of approaches to mindfulness and various practices. I did not and do not believe that there is only one way to approach mindfulness. While my in-person classes were secular in approach, I always made space for sharing various religious, philosophical, and spiritual approaches to mindful living. Now that Gently Being's in-person work has been postponed indefinitely, I've decided that I really had to move to being more of a digital presence. And I then realized that the online space currently offers a plethora of resources for entirely secular approaches to mindfulness. Since I don't consider myself to be an entirely secular person, I began to see that Gently Being could now be a space that was more open and overt about sharing various religious and spiritual practices. Gently Being hopes to aid people in creating a personal spiritual foundation by integrating ritual and ceremony into our everyday lives. Gently Being will explore folktales, myths, legends, and offer inspiration from various mindful, spiritual, and religious practices. I do hope that you will join me in this journey. Since it is October and we are getting close to October 31st, I thought I would just share some brief ideas of how I approach this season. I recently came across an interview with the author Susanna Clarke. In the interview, Clarke described her new novel, Piranesi, as an anti-horror story. Having already read Piranesi, I immediately understood Clarke's description of her work. But beyond that, I saw an understanding and an approach to mystery that I also hold. Since reading Piranesi and the mentioned interview with Clarke, I have been contemplating the idea of anti-horror and its worldview. I must just share here that my ruminations are my own and may even deviate from what Clarke meant by anti-horror. Horror shares a view of mystery that something terrible is hidden in the dark, that the heart of the mystery is something malevolent. This worldview can be very persuasive. I am often to be found ranting against the evils that exist in my community or the perceived evils I see against myself. I can even find my mind resting in that idea that greed always wins, that maybe we all just at the very heart of ourselves are a little too selfish. Yet, deeper within me, which unfortunately means that sometimes it goes a little quiet, is a belief that the heart, the center of the mystery, there is something good to be found. This does not mean that there are not evil acts, that there is not pain, suffering, and sorrow. Looking into the dark is not meant to be comfortable. Yet, sometimes, after those first trepidatious steps, we may find strength and beauty that we would never have found if we had stayed in the light. My approach to the October season is akin to an anti-horror story. I take the time to investigate the dark and the monsters, but all the while I hold a foundational belief that there is something good to be found. Thanks for listening to Gently Being. If you like this podcast, please consider subscribing and leaving a review wherever you find your podcasts. You can also find Gently Being on YouTube, where we share videos on more ideas for how you can integrate ritual and ceremony into your everyday life. Once again, thanks so much for spending time with Gently Being.